I'll be reading from Genesis 33, verses 1 to 11. Now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids. He put the maids with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on ahead of them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. When Esau looked up and saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children, whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maids drew near, they and their children, and they bowed down. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And finally Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that I have met?" Jacob answered, "To find favor with my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob said, "No, please, if I find favor with you, then accept my present from my hand, for truly to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Since you have received me with such favor, please accept my gift that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have everything I want." So he urged him, and he took it.
Happy Easter. I know that was 2 weeks ago, and that's okay. I haven't totally lost my mind. But it actually still is the Easter season, according to the Christian calendar. Now, most of us take our cues from capitalism's calendar, and so we're on to the next holiday. It's Mother's Day season now. But actually, in the Christian calendar, this is Eastertide, from Easter until Pentecost. We are still to be celebrating the resurrection and the life, Jesus himself. This is probably the longest Easter season I've ever experienced, because in addition to Easter running through Pentecost, according to the Christian calendar, according to the Forest Hills media production calendar, which is a new thing we had to invent, Easter actually started in January. We started working on Easter knowing that it was going to be an unusual year. We wouldn't be able to have a choir rehearsing. We weren't sure whether or not we would be back in person by Easter. And so we started working on things back in January. Some of the things we worked on were these 2 virtual choir pieces that you saw on Easter Sunday. And I was so pleased with how these turned out. All the work that Becky put into it, our musicians, our vocalists, I was so pleased. But not everything went smoothly while we were recording. And one of our august vocalists was brave enough and gracious enough to allow us to take a little peek behind the curtain at some of what went wrong during our Easter preparations. I seriously, when that happened, it took me like a solid 3 or 4 minutes to compose myself enough that I could be quiet, that Jeanette could take another stab at it. And she nailed it, of course. But as I was listening to Jeanette sing, I realized I know that feeling. I'm not a vocalist. I don't sing. You never want to hear me sing. But I know that feeling where, like, I know what's supposed to be happening, but then what's actually happening is something very different. And I've known that feeling an awful lot as we've been emerging out of our quarantine bubbles. I've known this feeling that, like, I know what a conversation with another human being is supposed to sound like. I know the melody and timbre. I know the rhythm and cadence. I know the pitch. I know in my mind what a conversation ought to sound like. But when it comes to actually finding words to plug into that conversation, I am often very, very much at a loss. Maybe you share this experience, that somehow in this intervening year from when the pandemic first arrived to where we are now, many of us have forgotten how a conversation works. There's a part of our brain that still knows. There's a part of our brain that remembers. This is the way that it flows. But then the part that actually forms the words, the part that actually gives meaning, that part just kind of disappears. In some ways, we have all had to reacquaint ourselves with the art and practice of talking to strangers. Craig referenced this idea earlier from Henry Nouwen that God is in the business of making things new. And we normally interpret that as something good, that it's a promise of God, a powerful work of God, a good gift that God gives to us. Behold, I am making all things new. But new things, in addition to being good, new things are also inherently strange. And we have, in some ways, over this past year, been made strange to one another. We have become strangers to one another because of the intervening things that have happened in our lives. A lot has transpired. And so I want to reflect this morning on how we can practice the art of talking to strangers, how we can regather the capacity that we need to have deep and meaningful, significant, even transformative conversations with one another after such a long period of being disconnected and somewhat alienated. And I want to take this text that Craig read for us, the story of Jacob and Esau reuniting after many years. I want to take this as a guide and to see what we can learn from this story that might apply to our own lives. I believe there are sort of three movements that we can follow throughout this: a movement of knowing, a movement of expecting, and a movement of sharing. So we can start with this idea of knowing. What do we know about one another? What did Jacob know about Esau? All of Jacob's knowledge of Esau was rooted in what had transpired in the past. And just to bring you up to speed on what's been going on, because this is a dramatic sibling rivalry story, what had happened was Jacob and Esau were both sons of Jacob, and Esau was the firstborn, and Esau, therefore, by law and custom, was entitled to the blessing. He was entitled to receive his father's blessing. And we tend to think of a blessing as good words, a benediction. If you snuck out of here before the benediction was offered at the end of the service, you wouldn't feel like you missed out on something all that substantial. But a blessing in this time was not mere words. A blessing was believed to not only actually do something in the world, speech acts were believed to be able to transform the world, but a blessing carried real monetary significance. The blessing was the inheritance. And Jacob, through deceit and treachery, steals the blessing, steals the birthright from Esau, and then takes it from their father, again via deception. And Esau is so enraged by this, and perhaps understandably so. Esau is so enraged by this that he consoles himself by figuring out how he's going to kill his brother. That's what their mother literally says to Jacob. Rebekah comes to Jacob and says, "Your brother Esau is so angry that he is consoling himself by planning to kill you." And so Jacob skips town. Jacob leaves. He's got the blessing. It's what he really wanted. And he leaves. And Jacob's journey goes through ups and downs. The deceiver himself is deceived by his future father-in-law, ends up marrying a woman he didn't really want to marry, and then having to work off additional debt to marry the woman that he really does want to marry. Jacob has had this experience, but has managed to do all right for himself. The blessing that he received from their father Isaac, this blessing is paying dividends. Jacob is flourishing. He's thriving. He's got 2 wives, pile of sons, pile of herds, pile of servants. He is prosperous. And then one day, one of those servants comes and says, "We've seen Esau. And Esau is coming toward us. And he has 400 men with him." So what does Jacob know in that moment? What Jacob knows is that his brother, who last he knew was trying to kill him, is now coming with 400 men. And the implication is Esau is coming for a fight. Esau is coming girded for war. Esau is coming to take back that which he believes is rightfully his. All of the bounty of the blessing that Jacob received should have rightfully been Esau's. And so Jacob knows that this is not going to end well. Jacob knows that Esau is set on blood. Jacob knows. But what Jacob knows is completely and totally factually incorrect. Because Esau is no longer a bundle of white-hot rage. Esau himself has also done very well. He's prosperous. He's stable. He has enough. Even without the blessing, Esau has been able to make a family and a life and a name for himself. So Esau is not coming to Jacob set on blood. Esau is coming to Jacob simply to greet him as a brother. So what Jacob knows about Esau and what is actually true about Esau are two different things. And this is a common mistake that we make in conversation with one another. When we're talking with one another, we often know things about the person we're talking with, and we know that we know them, and we know them deep in our bones, and we know that they're true, but the things that we know have no connection whatsoever to the person we're actually talking with. Malcolm Gladwell published a whole book on the idea of talking to strangers, and it's actually kind of a problematic book in a lot of ways, but his central thesis is remarkably accurate. He says the conviction that we know others better than they know us, and that we may have insights about them that they lack, but not vice versa, which is to say they don't know things about ourselves that we don't know. This conviction leads us to talk when we would do well to listen, and to be less patient than we ought to be when others express the conviction that they are the ones being misunderstood or judged unfairly. The fundamental mistake that we make in talking to one another, particularly when talking to strangers, is we make the mistake of knowing things that aren't actually true. And this is true in any phase or stage of life. We always carry this reflexive assumption that we basically know other people, when in reality we do not know other people. They have depths of their psyche, recesses of the soul, just like we ourselves do, that we are not privy to, that we don't know or understand. And acting this way, knowing things about other people that you're talking to, even if those things aren't true, doesn't make you a bad person. This is not like judgment or shame. It's just the human condition. We can only really know that which happens between our own two ears. But the mistake that we make is to act as if the knowledge that we have about someone is identical to the reality of that person. And if this is true in normal daily life, imagine how much more true it is after a year of going through an unprecedented experience and all of us having unprecedented responses to it. You may have known someone for decades and really think that you know them. And then you saw them respond to this pandemic, and you thought, who actually are you? Maybe this happened with your own spouse. Maybe there are things that happened in your home that you were like, I don't feel like I know you. It's because we are experiencing something that is unprecedented, and so none of us knows how we ourselves would respond, nor can we know how someone else would respond. I was talking with a friend of mine recently. I don't know them super well, but I know their parents just a little bit, or at least I have an idea of who their parents are. And I asked them, so how are your parents navigating this pandemic? And I had certain assumptions based on what I knew about their parents' political leanings and news media diet. I had certain assumptions about how they were responding. But what I knew or thought I knew about my friend's parents was completely and totally inaccurate. My assumptions about them had no actual connection to how they've been living over this past year. And so it is for so many of us. We think we know something about someone, but what we know and what is real are two different things. And Scripture has wonderful wisdom for us in light of this human condition that we all face, in light of the fact that all of us think we know things about others and we know them deep in our bones, but they aren't actually true. Scripture's admonition to us is that everyone should be quick to listen. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Because when we're in a conversation, when we're talking, we aren't actually learning. It's only when we're listening that we are learning. And so if we genuinely want to reestablish connection with one another, we would do well to lead with listening, to rebuild that energy of focused listening, to redevelop that muscle, because listening is not automatic. Hearing is automatic. Listening is a discipline and a skill. And the more we can cultivate that discipline and sharpen that skill, the better off we will be in our relationships with one another. Because the things that we think we know are not always true. Madeleine L'Engle has this phrase. She applies it to spirituality, but I think it applies equally well within our conversations. She describes a groping dark of knowing my not knowing. And this is a great gift that we can carry in the midst of this, is that we can know that we don't know. We can know our not knowing, so we can approach our conversations with humility and graciousness and patience, and we can lead with listening so that we can actually learn something along the way. But it's not just that we know things that aren't actually true. We also carry with us not only our own sense of knowing, but we carry expectations. My hunch is that these expectations have been pretty difficult for some of us, especially as we think about reintegrating into church life. We had this in the span of what felt like just a couple hours, went from relatively normal life at church to being not gathering together in person at all, figuring this all out online. And I think we all sort of developed a set of expectations what church will be like once we can safely regather in person. I know I had those expectations. And I still remember the first Sunday that we had this tentative effort all the way back in June of last year to try to come back. And I remember leaving the service and thinking, well, that was miserable. It simply did not measure up to the expectations I had in my mind. Jacob has a set of expectations about Esau. They grow out of his misunderstanding, his fundamental attribution error about his brother. But he has a set of expectations, and his expectations are that Esau is coming for his life. Esau is coming to kill him. And so Jacob makes a set of plans according to his false knowledge about Esau and according to the expectations that he has about Esau. And Jacob is preparing for a bloodbath. And it's not clear from the text if Jacob thinks he can actually succeed in combat against his brother, but it seems pretty clear that he's willing to try. The way he structures this greeting, he comes out in front, and then the least valuable parts of his family moving back toward the most valuable parts of his family, and the presumption being that there are others around who will be prepared for armed combat. And the crazy thing about preparing for armed combat is that it actually can create armed combat, even if that isn't your ultimate intention. We've seen this in international conflicts, that two sides have a military buildup, a military escalation, and then an accident happens. A plane flies into the wrong airspace, a soldier discharges a weapon unintentionally, and all of a sudden the thing that they were preparing for but trying to avoid is now reality because of the preparations they were making, because of the expectations they were carrying. And Jacob very easily could have provoked Esau into the very thing Esau was trying to avoid: armed combat with his brother. Expectations are tremendously powerful things because they govern our behavior. And so it would serve us well, as we're in this weird space of trying to find our way back together, not entirely there yet, but moving closer, it seems, week by week. It would serve us well to interrogate our own expectations. To think about not just what we expect from worship, but what we expect from the Sunday school hour, what we expect from our conversations in the foyer, to realize, to acknowledge all of the expectations that we carry, and to recognize that it is highly unlikely that all of those expectations will be met. Celeste Headley, a radio journalist, wrote a book about talking to one another and the importance of how we talk. And she talks a lot about expectations. And she writes this. She says, people get upset when their expectations aren't met. No surprise there. This is not an earth-shattering revelation that people get upset when their expectations aren't met. Although it sounds obvious when we say it, we often in the moment don't realize the extent to which our own emotional state is contingent upon the expectations that we were carrying and whether they were being met or not being met. And she says, at first, I couldn't see how I could do anything to mitigate that. After all, I can't prevent someone from having expectations. I can't know what those expectations are, and even if I did, I couldn't possibly accommodate. So even if we could all be totally candid, put all of our expectations on the table, there's no way that we collectively could measure up to, that we could meet all of our shared expectations of one another. It'd be impossible. But what Hedley says that's so significant is she says, what I can do is be honest about my own expectations. I may not be able to control the expectations that others have, but I can be honest about my own expectations, and I can be willing to vocalize them. And if I vocalize my expectations and someone else vocalizes their expectations and we discover they're mismatched, at least now we're in a space of honesty. At least now we can have the conversation about the ways our expectations don't align, as opposed to each of us just carrying silently these expectations and then being disappointed or angry when those expectations are not met. Jacob set out on a very, very dangerous course of action based on the expectations that he had. And I don't think most of us are in danger based on the expectations that we have, but certainly we could be setting ourselves up for disappointment, frustration, disillusionment, based on the expectations that we're carrying. And so the more we can verbalize them, the more we can process them together, share openly and honestly about them, the healthier our interactions and conversations can be. And so the fundamental challenge in talking to strangers is knowledge. We think we know things, but the things we think we know are not necessarily true. But we also carry expectations. As we enter into these conversations with one another, we have a set of expectations. We may not even be honest about them with ourselves, what our expectations are, but we all are carrying some measure of expectation. And again, the biblical wisdom is that we be quick to listen. But the biblical wisdom doesn't end with listening. The biblical wisdom is not simply that we all sit in a circle in complete silence and just wait. The biblical wisdom is that we lead with listening, but we also be willing to speak or willing to share. And this is the third movement I want to reflect on, the importance of our willingness to share openly and honestly with one another. It's fascinating to me to think about the way that Jacob structured his response to Esau. He divides the children among his two wives, Leah and Rachel, and the two maids. He put the maids with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. This sequencing is sequencing in reverse order of importance or value. Remember, part of Jacob's story is that he was tricked into marrying Leah, even though he truly loved Rachel. And so the wife that he truly loves, he puts in the very back, shielded, protected by his other wife, by the maids, by their children. And his son, his favorite son, Joseph, the only one of the 12 children that are named here, also gets put in the very back. Now, if you're preparing for battle, this makes sense, right? Shield that which is closest to you. Treasure that which is most important to you. Keep it protected and ensconced in a bubble of safety. But there's something interesting that happens when we pay very close attention to this text. Jacob is coming and he's bowing, he's prostrating himself. He's essentially begging for his life without even using his words. Remember, he's expecting that Esau is there to kill him. And so he's taking this effort upon himself. And even before they met, he had sent preemptively a gift to Esau. Maybe Esau will be placated and happy if I send him some livestock and some servants. And then Esau won't want to kill me anymore. But Esau has this diametrically opposite response to what Jacob thinks he knows about him. Esau runs up to Jacob, embraces him, falls on his neck, and kisses him. I was reading a Jewish biblical scholar who pays great attention to the fact that Esau is the only one active in the work of reconciliation here. Esau is the one who runs. Esau is the one who embraces. Esau is the one who falls on his brother's neck. Esau is the one who kisses Jacob. And then both of them, it's true, weep. But nowhere do we see Jacob reciprocating this posture of vulnerable reconciliation. In fact, we describe this as the reconciliation of Jacob and Esau, but I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. Because as you continue reading down through, Esau is in this very emotional state. He's looking for a genuine heart-to-heart connection with his brother, and Jacob is all business. He's negotiating. well, maybe if I give you this much, you will leave me alone. Esau wants a relationship, and Jacob is committed to having a business transaction. I think part of the evidence we see of that is that Jacob keeps that which is nearest and dearest to his heart as far away from Esau as possible. Jacob is not interested in Esau coming fully into his life and the two of them sharing full mutuality and sharing together. Jacob has no interest. And at the end of the story, Jacob lies to Esau again, and they go their separate ways. Esau invites Jacob to journey together, and Jacob says, well, you go on ahead and I'll catch up. And then Jacob goes in a completely different direction. Jacob is not reconciled to Esau. Jacob is not set back in right relationship with Esau. And it has to be in part because Jacob was unwilling to share that which was most essential to his understanding of himself, to share that which was most treasured within his heart. He was unwilling to allow Esau anywhere near it. And I think this same danger can exist for us. We understand the melody and rhythm and cadence and pitch of a conversation, but when we do find the words to put in it, the words are often empty platitudes. We don't want to be honest with one another about what we have experienced over this past year. We don't want to allow people near to that which is closest to our heart, closest to our essential self. We keep it protected, sheltered, cloistered. So we have conversations about the weather, we have conversations about sports, maybe we have conversations about business. But when it comes to that which is truly the essence of who we are, we often stay at a distance. But the great opportunity that sits before us as we come back together, as we learn again how to talk with one another, is that we don't have to replicate that pattern. I don't think this is something new. I think this is something many of us have struggled with for a very long time, long before COVID. It is much easier to sit in our Sunday school classes or in other contexts and simply share the most superficial, obvious aspects of our lives. And what can happen is that we actually train ourselves to think that's the only thing that's going on with those around us. We begin to know things about other people based on these superficial aspects that we share. We begin to know things that aren't actually true. And so it is entirely possible that we will come back together at the end of this year and we will have reconnection not that different from Jacob and Esau, where one party is fully invested, fully committed, ready to reconnect and become, we might even use the word intimate, although that's a fraught and loaded word. One party is ready and the other is like, well, let's keep a little bit of a distance here. Let's make sure that which is closest to me stays safe and protected, and at the end of the day, we are going to go our separate ways. So will we be like Jacob in an unwillingness to share that which is most important to us? Or will we celebrate the wonderful abandon of Esau, running toward one another, embracing one another, once it's safe, obviously, taking the risk of being emotional with one another? Will we share that which is closest to our hearts? We all, in the coming weeks and months, will have to continue to grapple with our own sense of knowledge, the things that we know about one another that aren't actually true. And the biblical wisdom is profound, that we should be quick to listen. And we all need to be mindful of the expectations that we are carrying into these conversations, knowing that unmet expectations can be a source of profound frustration, disappointment, disillusionment, even anger. And so we would do well to be honest about our expectations with ourselves and with one another. But the biblical wisdom is not just that we be quick to listen and only quick to listen, but that we be quick to listen and slow to speak, but willing to speak. Willing to share openly, honestly, vulnerably about the things that have been most significant, most transformative, most profound, most difficult within our past year. My hope and my prayer for us is that unlike Jacob and Esau, when some of us come back together after a long time of feeling somewhat estranged, that we would experience not just superficial reconciliation that makes it possible to do efficient business with one another, but that we would experience true and total restoration into deep, meaningful relationship with one another. Knowing that it is in those relationships that we encounter not just one another, but that we encounter God. Would you pray with me? Gracious and merciful God, we give you thanks that while we were estranged from you, you took the first step toward reconciliation. And we celebrate, God, that because we can be reconciled to you through Christ, we also can be reconciled to one another. We can live in right relationship with all people. So we pray, God, that by your Spirit you would give us the humility that we need to know our own not knowing. That you would give us the peace that we need to adjust our own expectations. And that you would give us the courage that we need to share openly and honestly with one another. And that in doing so, we would encounter your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose precious name we pray. Amen.